Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 9. Chapter 9 deals with groups and teams, strategies for decision making and problem solving. In our professional or community interactions, we may have to work with various types of groups effectively. So this chapter will teach us a little bit more about these different processes and coach us on how to communicate effectively in these group-based situations. So let's get started. During this chapter, we will define what a group is and discuss how communication takes place in groups. In addition, we will identify the characteristics and different components of groups. Also, we will describe the advantages and disadvantages of group decision making. In addition, we will distinguish among task, maintenance, and self-serving group roles. Then, we will assess the most effective behaviors for reaching goals in groups and how we can enact those different communication behaviors effectively. And we will explain how gender may influence group interactions. And finally, we will apply techniques for improving group effectiveness. This is a very important chapter that will ideally assist many of you as you go about your professional and community interactions in the future. So let's get started. So let's talk a little bit more about what constitutes a group. A group is defined as several individuals who interact, typically on a regular basis. They have specific roles and positions that each person is supposed to carry out. The group is expected to work in a cooperative manner in order to achieve specific goals. So different types of groups may include this picture that you see on this slide, which appears to be some kind of an athletic team. And athletic teams obviously are working cooperatively as a group to try to win various athletic games and perhaps win different titles and trophies and things like that, right? But we may also find ourselves in professional groups in our places of employment. And this is very often something that most of us will encounter. And what this means is that it's very important for us to learn about what constitutes good group-based communication and learn how to adapt our skills so that we can be more effective. It also is a good idea for us to learn to identify some of the behaviors that are not effective in groups so that when we see it playing out in a group, we can perhaps try to work to encourage more positive behavior. And of course, we always want to make sure that we are not the ones enacting the negative group behavior. So let's get started on how we can best communicate professionally in a group context. So one of the first things that we want to identify when we enter into a group-based situation is what is the motivation or purpose for this group even existing, right? You may be assigned to a group project in one of your classes someday, or maybe you've already experienced this. Or you may be assigned to a different group at your organization or place of employment in order to address a certain type of an issue that the organization is facing, right? So every group has some kind of a purpose or motivation for existing. And typically there are different types of positions that people occupy within these groups which define the group structure, right? So you may have someone, for example, who is appointed by the organization to be the leader or the facilitator of the group interaction. And then you may have several people within that group that have been requested to join the group in order to work on a project that they need to develop some kind of an outcome or a goal that is accomplished. When we look at different groups, all groups have to get their goals accomplished through the process of communication, right? So this is one of the reasons why good, effective communication is extremely important so that we can make sure that our group-based interactions are appropriate, professional, and that we are able to meet the group goals most efficiently. Now, certain types of communication behaviors can break down the efficiency and the productivity of groups. And we're going to talk about some of these behaviors later. But for now, we just want to look at some of the different terms that we need to understand as we move forward looking at groups. Now, in addition to group patterns of communication, we can look at patterns of communication related to, what are the ways that people tend to interact in this group? Is this a group that tends to get most of their business done primarily online? Or is this a group that meets in person? Is this a group that is informal or more formal, right? But we can also look at the different norms and rules that exist within a group. So the norms and rules for a group may include what happens when people get together and have a meeting, for example. So a second ago, I talked about how there might be somebody who has been put in charge of facilitating the group. So it's generally expected that the person who has been designated by an organization to be in charge is the one that will begin the meeting, that will facilitate much of the items that are being discussed during the meeting, right? They'll be bringing up the topics, they'll be facilitating the discussion. They are also the people that we would expect would play a leadership role in managing any kind of technology that might be necessary in order to ensure that all group members can attend the meeting. So nowadays you have a lot of groups where some of the members might be attending via Skype or Zoom or things like that, right? So the group norms are basically the rules that exist within a group for how they get business done and how communication takes place. And another thing that's extremely important for us to be aware of is what's considered to be the group climate. And this is basically the emotional atmosphere or the cultural atmosphere of the group. So when we think about climate issues, we can think about things like, what is the overall feeling when people are at the meeting or in a group having a meeting? Is there a supportive environment? Do people tend to behave in ways where they support each other? Is there equal participation by all members of the group in terms of getting work done? Or are certain members of the group attempting to hoist all of the work on one or maybe two members of that group, right? So we can also look at climate issues related to things like, are people genuine in the way that they relate to each other? Do people feel safe to voice their opinions, or perhaps to voice a dissenting opinion or an opinion that goes against the general consensus of the group, right? This idea of climate is also relevant in organizational interactions. So there's a lot of research and books that have been dedicated to creating a positive climate in the organization with which you work, right? And one of the reasons why researchers and experts focus on group climate or climate issues is because they know that employees are more effective at completing their jobs if they are working in an atmosphere where it's a positive climate. We also know that when people work at an organization that has a positive company culture, that people tend to be happier at work, they're more productive, there's less turnover, there's less calling in sick, right? And these are all things that organizations need to attend to, because every time an organization is forced to hire somebody else, right, there's a lot of money that they must invest just to hire one other person or one new person, right? So this is an issue that's extremely important. And in terms of moving forward in this chapter, I would like you to think back on some of the interactions that you've experienced up until this point in your life working in groups. And these groups can be groups that are in classrooms, they could be in community organizations, they could be a group at your church that you work with, right? And you can ask yourself, okay, which group interactions have I been in that were really positive, that I felt like it was extremely collaborative and supportive, and it was a good place to be, right? And then you can ask yourself, what are some group interactions I've had that I did not enjoy, that I did not feel positive about experiencing, right? So now, understanding some of these issues related to emotional atmosphere and group climate, you can understand why it is that certain groups have been positive experiences for you and other groups perhaps have been less positive. Figure 9.2 allows us to look at the different stages that take place in group development. At the bottom of this figure, you see that there is the forming stage, and the forming stage is characterized by some uncertainty as people try to figure out who is in charge, what the group's purpose is. People are attempting to fit into the group. They want to be perceived as likable, right? And also this is where people start to feel that they are a part of the group, ideally, right? And then becoming more of a cohesive group in the forming stage allows people to move through the next several stages of group development. Now, the next phase is the storming phase. And this is basically where people learn how to work together, and oftentimes this is characterized by some types of conflict. So people may have, for example, task conflict. Task conflict deals with, okay, how should we complete these tasks, or who should be responsible for completing these different tasks, and how much work should each member of the group do, right? People may also have different relational conflicts, which could deal with, who's going to be in more of a leadership role in the group, how do people relate to each other in the group, things like that. During the storming phase, there is what is considered to be secondary tension, and this can result when group members may disagree or struggle with who should have more leadership or prominence in terms of the group. So during the storming phase, instead of being just concerned about fitting in the group, people are actually now more emphasizing the ability to express their ideas, right, and opinions, and also occupy a place in the group structure so that they can have some kind of agency or power. In the next phase, the norming phase, we tend to see that a clear group structure will take place or emerge, right? The different roles that people will be occupying in the group also becomes pretty apparent at this stage, right? And the group also at this stage will solidify its behavioral norms, especially with regards to how they deal with conflict, right? So if we decide in our group, either explicitly or implicitly, that when a conflict comes up, we are going to address it as a group, and we're going to hear everyone's opinion about it, then that would be a type of a norm that people can establish at this phase, okay? Moving on to the performing stage, this is when people really shift gears and go into task accomplishment or task achievement, right? So according to experts on group performance, the performing stage is actually perceived as the most important stage of the group and the group development. And this is because if the group has progressed effectively through the other stages, then this stage will allow different members to integrate their different abilities and knowledge and skills so that they can work together, right, to achieve the goals that they came together to achieve. And this includes overcoming any kind of potential problems that could emerge in the group, right? So this is really the most productive phase of the group, as long as people have moved through the previous stages effectively. Finally, we get to the adjourning stage, and during the adjourning stage, people will look back on the things that they feel like they did well as a group, or maybe things that they think could have been improved upon. They may also debate or consider whether they want to continue the relationships that they made while they were a part of the group, right? So in some situations where there's a group performance, people may commemorate the ending of the group function by having a party or a dinner or something like that. And so there may actually be a formal marking of the end of the group. However, in organizations, you may be brought together to work with people, and there may not be a formal ending of the group, but you may continue to see each other at work with an understanding that at some point in the future, you probably will end up being in a group together again. So all of these stages are extremely important, and they each play a role in terms of our ability to effectively fit into groups and also to perform task-oriented functions. So let's look at some advantages that take place based on small group processes. Some of the advantages include the ability to pool resources, right? And we can look at resources in terms of our knowledge, our skills, our abilities, right? Maybe we have certain types of connections that will help the group achieve what they need to achieve, things like that. Also, a small group function can also increase individual motivation. So people may be more motivated to work in a group than on their own. And so this is another way to help organizations or different types of community groups achieve the types of goals that they're trying to reach. It's also easier for people who are working in a small group to identify mistakes that may have been made. This is because you have more sets of eyes, right, and ears listening and looking. So if there is a mistake that's being made, chances are one person in the group or a couple of people in the group will be able to identify that, and hopefully they will feel comfortable enough to express their opinions about what's happening in the group. In addition, the small group decision tends to be more positively received by other types of interests. And this is probably also related to the fact that there are power in numbers, right? So it's implied that if you make a decision as a group, that there is some kind of a group consensus that went into that. And all of these things can play into how credible and how effective the decisions that the group makes are. In addition, it is worth acknowledging that humans are social creatures, and in general, people tend to enjoy working in groups. However, we need to identify that there is a condition on this, and in order for people to enjoy working in a group, the group needs to have what has been called a positive culture, right? We've talked about this issue before related to company culture and the climates, the emotional climate that a organization or a group might have. So what this means is that, we always want to do our part in facilitating a positive group interaction for people, right? And what this means is that we want to bring ourselves to the table prepared to discuss and contribute. We want to avoid making communication decisions that might be received in a hostile manner, or people might perceive that we are distracting the group from achieving what they came together to do, right? And we're going to get into some of these things that we don't want to do here in a second. But in general, these are some of the advantages of working in groups. Now, there are also disadvantages of the small group, and some of these can include people who may let other people handle all the work. I'm sure that you folks at this point in your educational or professional careers have experienced the downside of groups, in the sense that there are just some people who are more productive and motivated to work and participate, and there are other people who just are not. And so that is one big disadvantage, is that we do run the risk that all of the work that should be getting done by everyone in the group may just fall onto the shoulders of one or two people in the group. There may also be conflict that people have with personal goals. So let's say you are assigned to a group in order to achieve something at your organization, and people in the group have personal agendas that they are attempting to fulfill through the group, right? This may be related to something going on at the workplace. Maybe they want to promote their career. People may also have different personal ego-based agendas that might distract or derail the group from achieving what they need to achieve. So this is also a potential drawback. In addition, sometimes decisions in groups can be dominated by a few people who are more outspoken or assertive about putting their views out there. This is one of the reasons why it is so important for us to always solicit the opinions of everyone in the group, right? And we can do this verbally through asking people, what do you all think about this? You can also do it through email chains. If you folks are going over different topics via email or something like that, you can put in explicit questions and ask people to participate or to give their opinion, right? Sometimes we may find ourselves in group situations where people are unwilling to compromise what they think about the best outcome or solution. So sometimes groups can run into problems when you have maybe factions within the group, where one faction believes that it should be this way, another faction believes that it might be another way. And this is especially problematic if people are not willing to compromise their beliefs or opinions about these various issues. So all of the things that we've discussed up until this point about effective conflict resolution obviously would apply in the group. So generally speaking, we should strive to compromise whenever it's possible and seek to listen to other people's opinions and feedback, and really strive to integrate everyone's skills and resources in the group decision making. Group decision making and actions are often more risky than individual actions, and this is because of the fact that there can be a inherent perception by a group that they have made a decision that is perfect or ideal. Also, the issue of having a group consensus can cause people to think that It's not possible that there are any downsides or drawbacks to their decision, right? And in extreme cases, we may find that people in groups engage in a process called groupthink. And groupthink is a very negative group process that can emerge when you have a very insulated group of people who are working towards some kind of a goal. And this is characterized by a lack of willingness to incorporate dissenting opinions, right? So dissenting opinions are those opinions that do not go along with the dominant majority. And so when somebody expresses something that is different than the dominant majority, and the dominant majority says something like, oh, well, no, we've looked at that and we're sure that the way we're going is the right direction, then that is considered silencing dissenting opinions. We may also silence people by engaging in various implicit or explicit silencing strategies in groups, right? So this can happen when people verbally say, they may verbally interrupt someone in a group or verbally take over the floor when someone else has been speaking, right? Or they may non-verbally do things that might cause the person who had a different opinion to feel that they shouldn't have said anything, such as maybe scoffing at what they said or rolling their eyes or doing other kinds of nonverbal invalidations that can contribute to anybody who goes against the dominant majority of the group feeling as if they should just keep quiet. This is another reason why we always want to be very careful about the climate that we are contributing to in a group, so that we can make sure that the group that we are in is going through the process of effective group work and decision making. In addition, decisions in the group can also take longer because people have to discuss things, and if there are dissenting opinions or different opinions, then people have to work that through, right? So these are all some of the disadvantages that can be involved with group work. So let's look at some of the different types of situations that we might find ourselves in where it would be an ideal solution to assign a group to deal with the issue. The first situation would be when we're dealing with a complex problem where there is not an easy decision, or perhaps the decision making requires a multifaceted approach, right? So you can look at things related to making changes in the organization, or things like that may deal with lots of different issues. Lots of different people are involved in organizational changes, and so anytime there's a complex problem, we may want to consider forming a group in order to address it. The group also is useful when there are many facets to the problem, and I mentioned this just a second ago. So there might be an issue we're dealing with as an organization, and maybe there is a financial aspect to that issue. There may also be a person power aspect to the issue, like are there enough people at the organization to do what we need? There may also be something that relates to our stakeholders and how they perceive this issue or the decision that we're about to make regarding the issue, right? So that would be an example of having many facets related to the same issue. Groups also require that we have several people that are available in order to join the group and contribute time, energy, and thought. In addition, the assumption of a group is that people will divide the labor relatively evenly in the group. So what this means is that when you go into a group, or if you're leading a group, we always want to be mindful that we allow every person to participate. And sometimes you might find there are some people who do not perceive that they want to participate very much. And of course, this is one of the issues that leaders and groups have to deal with. And so you can do your best to attempt to involve or integrate people, and hopefully they will step up and do the different types of things that really are required in groups in order for them to be successful. Another situation where group decision making is ideal is when there may be many solutions that could exist for a given issue. Now, having several opinions and people working on something obviously can help us identify several different solutions that one person may not be able to do all by themselves. In addition, groups allow us to include diverse views, opinions, and expertise regarding a given issue. And this is another reason why working in groups can really be an asset for organizations, because anytime you are able to draw from the current talent and expertise that you have, you really get the best out of people's day-to-day behavior, their day-to-day performance, but also the long-term survival of the organization will be enhanced when you are utilizing all of the resources that people bring to the table. As before, we do have to have different people available in order to join a group. So this is something we always need to consider. In addition, if you are at an organization where there are current groups already in place and you are looking to assign people to other groups, you should always be conscious of what other group memberships and workloads people are already dealing with, because you don't want to assign people to too many different group situations where they may experience burnout or feel that they're not really able to do a good job because they are overloaded. The group role classification model helps us to understand the different functions that participants assume when they're in a group. It also identifies the different types of functions that people should assume and should avoid when they're in groups. The first of these is task-oriented roles. The second is maintenance-oriented roles, and the third are self-serving roles. We're going to go through each of these one by one. Task roles exist so that the group can achieve the different types of functions and goals that they need to achieve. And task roles are basically oriented around helping the group to achieve its goals. So task roles might involve initiating conversations or initiating the beginning of a project activity or getting something started, getting the ball rolling. People may also engage in information seeking, asking people what they think about various issues related to what the group is doing. There may also be external information seeking in order to solidify resources or information that might help the group in terms of defining how they need to approach a problem or what the solutions are. In addition, opinion seeking, as I talked about before, is really important because we want to always strive to integrate the opinions of as many people in the group as possible so that we can have the maximum product in terms of the quality of the product, the group product. Information giving is also important. So passing along information that people in the group need to be successful, referring them to examples of prior projects that are similar so that they can get a sense of how they need to approach it, or different kinds of definitions or terms that could be useful. Obviously, giving our opinions, especially related to group ideas, is important so that we can contribute to the group. Clarifying questions are intended to help to reduce confusion or uncertainty in terms of what people specifically mean about, let's say, a project or addressing an issue or solving a problem in the group or something like that. Coordinating is also very important. This deals with coordinating different group members to do different types of projects. We may also be coordinating different times so that we can set up a meeting. We might also be coordinating technology so that everybody can be working on the same project from different locations. Also, evaluating is very important, and this is where people in the group take a step back and say, okay, now that we have developed these products or these ideas or this solution, how effective is this solution in achieving what we intended for it to achieve? In addition, groups are able to test consensus, which basically allows us to see whether the people in the group all agree that what we're doing is the right approach. We might also find that groups go outside of the group to test consensus. So this may involve talking to different employees at the organization prior to implementing a change or something like that. In comparison, maintenance roles exist primarily to help the group run smoothly. So task-related goals are much more focused on the product that the group will come up with, and maintenance roles are dealing with the process that the group members go through as they develop the product. So we may think about encouragement as a type of maintenance role, right? This is when members are warm and responsive to other people in the group. They may also praise other people's efforts in the group, right? Gatekeeping involves keeping the communication channels open. This also involves getting people to participate who might be hesitant to give their opinion. And this also involves not letting a couple of dominant members sort of take over the group or guide the group too much, right? So that it really involves making sure that there's a balance in terms of participation, so that you don't have some people running the whole show and some people just sitting back and not doing hardly anything or contributing. Harmonizing deals with the attempt that people may have in a group to try to minimize disagreements or to reconcile misunderstandings that may have taken place, right? People who take up this role may try to reduce tension through the use of, humor or other types of stress relief, communication, comments, things like that. Compromising is also very important, and this is extremely valuable in a group, and this is where people are willing to compromise their position in order to maintain group cohesion. Also, this admits to our ability to admit when we've made a mistake and to, apologize and obviously correct whatever we've been doing. So the compromising skill in life is effective for organizational communication and, of course, for relational communication as well. And finally, we have standard setting. And this is where a member will assess whether different group members are satisfied with the different types of procedures that are in place for assessing whether we've met what we're supposed to meet in terms of our goals, right? So this is also where people will evaluate the group function. How well did we do in terms of addressing this issue? What could we have done better? What would we do differently next time, right? These are all things that can be involved in maintenance roles. Now, there are several self-serving roles that some members of a group may occupy, which can impede the functioning of a group and will prevent members from working effectively together. So one of these is blocking. And blocking is when people communicate in a way that is either disagreeable or they digress the group conversation so that it doesn't actually go where it needs to go, so that something productive is done during the group meeting. Aggression is obviously not a good thing anytime, but especially in groups. And aggression is basically when people might criticize or blame other people. They may also, come against what people are proposing. And this is often done because people have, in a desire to try to enhance their own standing or their own status in the group. People who are recognition seeking may attempt to become the focus of attention by boasting or talking about their own accomplishments, or they may be talking very loudly or exhibit behavior that is inappropriate or attention seeking, right? They may do things like talk about something that is really not appropriate to be talking about. They just may basically derail the group and get the group to focus on them instead of the project. People who withdraw basically don't seem that interested. They might be indifferent to the group function. They might be, thinking about something else. Maybe they're sulking. They might have like a negative attitude that they bring to the group. So people just avoid them and don't try to include their opinion. People who are dominating tend to do this in various ways. They may do it by interrupting other people. They may try to direct other people in the group or run or control the group, right? They may also insist that their idea or their way is the right way and the group should acquiesce to that. Joking is another way that people can have a self-serving role. And joking basically just deals with cynical or joking comments that are either inappropriate or irrelevant to the task at hand. So it's important for us to be aware of this, because sometimes we just might think, oh, that so-and-so is such a funny guy, but actually cracking jokes that derail the group from doing what they're supposed to do is really not productive and should be avoided. You may also have people in groups who are self-confessors. These people may use the other people in the group as a forum to try to reveal personal feelings or insights or experiences that they're having that really do not deal with the functioning of the group or the purpose of the group. And again, this is a type of seeking, sort of a self-attention seeking behavior, right? Related to dominating, joking, right? Self-confessing is another type of attention seeking. You may also have people who are help seekers. These are people who try to elicit sympathy or pity from, other individuals in the group. They may say, "Oh boy, things are so hard with our department right now, and this and that, and we had to go through so much." And and it might be true. They might have gone through a lot, but it's really important just for us to always think about what we're saying when we're saying it, or even before we're saying it, to ask ourselves, is this something that is going to contribute to the group achieving what they're supposed to be achieving, or is this going to bring attention to myself and derail the group? So anytime we're in a group, we should strive to behave in ways that are cooperative versus competitive. The cooperative goal structure allows members of a group to work together to achieve their objectives. So what this means is that we are willing and able to elicit several opinions from people in the group. We're willing to let other people participate, and we are willing to participate ourselves. We are willing to deal with problems that might emerge or obstacles that may emerge in the group proactively, right? And we're willing to help resolve conflicts effectively so that the group can move through it and achieve their goals. However, sometimes we may find that people in our group have a competitive goal structure, and this happens when different members of the group may hinder one another's efforts to obtain a goal. And several of the behaviors that we talked about before with the self-serving roles could be understood as behaviors that would contribute to a competitive environment. There are several strategies that we might use in order to reach decisions in groups. One of these is the majority vote, and the majority vote is basically where we just allow every person to express what they think should happen, and then we take the majority vote that reaches at least 51% or the most dominant majority. We may also average people's decisions in order to come up with our solution, right? And so this is basically where we just take the most popular decision, and that becomes the group decision. We may also defer to an expert member of the group who perhaps has specific training or knowledge or experience in a given area, and in doing that, we are deferring to them because they are the expert. We may also use the nominal group technique, and this is basically an approach where we use limited discussion, and then we have secret voting or ballots in order to reach a decision. This is a great approach in terms of getting people to be honest about what they think, especially when they may be reticent to voice their opinions because the issue is controversial, or perhaps the climate in the group is more competitive, and there may be certain members who might attack or criticize the decisions of other members. So the nominal group technique can be very effective for dealing with these kinds of group situations. We may also use the Delphi method, and this deals with selecting a group of experts who don't actually communicate with each other, but instead they just may respond to a series of questions or questionnaires. And what's good about this method is it prevents dominant members from influencing other members of the group excessively because the group members are not actually communicating with each other. It's also a useful method if you want to try to include or involve all people in finding a solution when it would be very inconvenient to do so because of, let's say, physical or location constraints. So this is something that we can think about when we have different types of geographical constraints or perhaps dominating climate issues so that we can make an effective decision. A quality circle deals with a group of employees, oftentimes who have different areas of expertise, and they come from different levels of the organization. And what they do is they get together and discuss the issue, look at the issue, and then they make recommendations that will improve the quality of the issue or the quality of the organization. Usually this deals with something related to profitability in an organization, and it's definitely something that is good to consider in terms of a strategy. So all of these are different ways that we might make decisions in groups, and depending on the group culture and climate, then we can select the most appropriate method. We can also look at the ways that gender may shape behaviors in groups. And as with any kind of generalizations, we always want to realize that these are generalizations, and this does not mean that every male will behave in this certain way and every female will behave in another way. We also don't want to assume that people should behave in a certain way because of the different gender assignment or group that they're in, right? But in general, what the research has shown when they have looked at group-based interactions is that males tend to be more goal-oriented. They tend to exhibit more explicit or implicit signs of power. So implicit signs of power would look like the amount of space that a man might take up in terms of sitting or, putting his arms out around him, right? Verbal signs of power may include how much a person talks, how loud they talk, right? How frequently, for how long, things like that. Males might be more likely to offer objective comments, right? Objective comments meaning that those are basically comments that are dealing with facts, right? Observational facts. Males may also view power as something that is finite, which means that there is only so much power available, and that in order to achieve the power status that a person wants, that they need to, behave in certain ways to do that. And men tend to be more likely to organize or analyze problems in a linear fashion compared to females. Females tend to be more focused on the group in general, in terms of the group culture, how people are feeling about being involved in the group, how the group is operating in terms of the emotional tones. Women also tend to be more patient in their communication. Women also tend to be more likely to share subjective opinions. So in my experience, this is what I think, or I feel that this process or this approach is better for these reasons. Women also tend to view power as something that is not finite, but instead is unlimited. So we can all share power in a group. We don't have to jockey for position to have the power, because power is something that we can all share as a group through communication. And women also tend to analyze problems more holistically rather than in a linear fashion. So a good example of analyzing a problem holistically would be looking at perhaps all of the external factors that may have gone into contributing to the way that a certain organization is dealing with things, right? This might deal with the employee perception, this might deal with the stakeholders, this might deal with the cultural climate, this might deal with finances. A linear approach to problem solving might look at things more in terms of like, when did the problem first start in terms of observable objective facts, and how has it progressed through time, right? That would be a way of approaching something in a linear way. So we can look at these things and we can see how, the differences in communication can sometimes complicate effective group interactions. But we can also see that some of these different approaches may actually help to balance out a group in terms of the energy and the strategies that people tend to bring to the group. So in conclusion, this chapter has reviewed several different approaches to working effectively in groups. And in general, we want to strive to do several things when we find ourselves in a group. One of the things we want to make sure that we can facilitate in a group, or at least participate in, is that the group goals are understood by members. This is extremely important so that people are clear as to why they are even involved in a group, and also it helps people to feel more motivated to participate in the group. We also want to encourage people to communicate freely, which means we want to ask questions, we want to be encouraging, we want to avoid attacking or criticizing people's perceptions or contributions, so that we can create a positive cultural climate so that people want to communicate freely in the group. We can also seek to reach the consensus whereby people in the group agree that we are doing the correct approach, or that we've made the right decision for this issue. We also want to be cognizant of task and maintenance issues, right? And make sure that we participate in a proactive, positive way at both task and maintenance issues in the group. And when we see people who maybe are not doing the appropriate behaviors, we can work to try to do some gatekeeping to try to silence members, or not silence, but we can maybe minimize the dominating members from behaving in a way that dominates the group. We can ask other people questions to get other people involved and things like that. We also want to think about maintenance questions related to encouraging people, creating the climate to be positive so people want to be in the group and want to contribute. We can also assess the problem-solving styles that are available to us, and we can look at the different ways that we might make decisions in groups so that we can choose the most ideal method of decision-making for the particular group that we may find ourselves in. We want to always strive to facilitate an open and supportive group context and climate. And this is because people will participate more freely and openly. And in the future, when you need people to participate in groups, you'll have a better outcome in terms of people volunteering or people giving it their positive contributions. Also, we want to do everything we can to facilitate a cooperative climate rather than a competitive climate. And finally, we want to seek to continually improve our group. This can be done by allowing people to express their opinions openly about decisions that the group is making. We always want to assess the effectiveness of our group decisions in terms of the organization, in terms of the impact on employees and things like that. And in general, we want to seek to try to improve our group and our organization whenever possible. And this is done in an optimum manner when we can encourage the maximum amount of participation. So I hope that this chapter has been useful for you. I'm sure that it will help you in your professional careers. And I thank you for your time and attention, and I'll talk to you all in the next chapter.